I used to believe that being born first meant I had a head start. But as I sit by the window of my small Brooklyn apartment, watching the sun rise over the city, I know better now. Samantha and I entered the world just 4 minutes apart, but it might as well have been a lifetime. She always had the applause. I always had the silence. In school, teachers would do a double take when they heard we were twins. People couldn't believe it. Samantha was golden and graceful. I was the quiet one, the one who stayed late to clean the brushes in art class while she floated off to join friends after cheerleading practice. Even at home, the difference was louder than words. She was my mother's laughter, my father's pride. I was the afterthought who got used to being called strong, as if strength was a prize for being overlooked. Sometimes, I think back to those years in Salem, the two-story house with the creaky porch, the backyard swings that only one of us was pushed on, the birthday cakes that always came in her favorite flavor. I wonder how long it took me to stop hoping someone would notice the difference. Maybe I never truly stopped. Maybe that is why I left. Now, I live in a city that doesn't know our history. No one here knows about the little girl who once cried in her closet because her sister's painting got hung on the fridge while hers was thrown away with the junk mail. Here, I am not Samantha's sister. I am just Jessica. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough. Growing up in Salem, Oregon, our house stood on a quiet cul-de-sac, framed by tall pines and a peeling white fence. From the outside, it looked ordinary, neat, warm even. But inside, everything felt tilted, not in a way you could measure with a level, but in how love was passed around the table, always landing more heavily in my sister's plate. My sister Samantha was the golden girl, even before she could speak in full sentences. She had that kind of face people wanted to take pictures of, the kind of giggle that made adults lean in. My mother, Linda, used to beam when Samantha spun around the living room in her ballerina dress. She'd clap and say, "There's my little sunshine." I stood by the wall, watching, holding the sketch pad Nana May had given me. I once showed my mother a drawing of a rabbit I had worked on for days. She smiled briefly and said, "That's nice, honey, but you should play outside more." I remember turning the page quietly and drawing a storm cloud instead. Samantha got things before she even knew she wanted them. On our 7th birthday, she had a backyard party with a 3-tier cake and matching pink balloons. I was told to help tie ribbons on the chairs. When I asked why I didn't get the camera she received, my mother said, "Because you're the strong one, Jessica. You can handle not always getting what you want." That sentence followed me like a shadow. Strong. Independent. Those words were used so often they stopped sounding like compliments. They were excuses. Whenever Samantha spilled juice or broke a glass, I got blamed. "Why weren't you watching your sister?" my mother would ask. And I, not knowing how to explain what it felt like to always be in the background, said nothing. My father, Mark, was quiet. He worked long hours and avoided conflict the way some people avoid cold weather. He was affectionate with Samantha, calling her princess and driving her to weekend activities. When I asked why he never came to see my art contests or open houses, he would say, "You're already so good. You don't need anyone cheering for you." I nodded, pretending that felt like love. Only one person made me feel like I mattered without having to earn it. My grandmother, Nana May, had a small house on the edge of town that smelled like gingerbread and chamomile. She never compared me to Samantha. She never told me to be stronger. She simply saw me. She taught me how to blend watercolors and gave me her old fountain pen when I turned 10. She kept all my drawings in a folder she called Jessica's Real World. Sometimes I would sit on her porch while she told me stories about artists who were misunderstood, unseen until the world finally caught up to them. "You're like that," she once said, cupping my chin. "You don't shout for attention, but one day, people won't be able to look away." I didn't fully understand it then, but I held on to her words like a secret I wasn't ready to tell. There were quiet moments that left bruises even though no one yelled, like when report cards came in. I brought home straight A's and placed them on the kitchen table. My mom barely glanced at them. "Good job," she said, without looking up. But when Samantha brought home a B+ in science, my parents bought her a small cake and said they were proud she was trying something hard. I sat in the next room, trying to fold the corners of my homework until they disappeared. I started expecting less. I stopped asking for sleepovers or help with school projects. I learned to hem my own pants when they tore. I learned how to fake a smile when someone said, "You and your sister must be so close." I learned how to clean up without being asked, how to speak softly, how to disappear in my own home. I sometimes think the worst part of that time wasn't what I didn't get. It was what I didn't know how to ask for, like someone noticing I was tired, or asking how my day was, or hugging me just because I was there. But I always had Nana. She made me feel like my quietness was a kind of magic. She saw my sketches and never told me to make them prettier or more cheerful. She saw the girl who colored outside the lines and told her, "Good. Keep going." Those early years carved something deep inside me, a kind of silence I didn't know how to break, a strength that felt more like armor than pride. I told myself it was fine. I was fine. I had to be. Because if I wasn't strong, I didn't know who I was allowed to be. I still remember the conversation as if it were stitched into my skin. We were sitting at the kitchen table a few weeks before high school graduation. My parents had just finished dinner. Samantha was upstairs packing for a pre-college summer workshop in California. My acceptance letter to community college lay quietly on the counter, ignored. "Your dad and I talked," my mom said, folding her napkin like she was smoothing out an apology. "We can only afford to support one of you through university. Samantha's program is more structured, and she has leadership potential. You'll be fine, Jess. You've always figured things out." I didn't say anything. I nodded, like I was used to doing, but something inside me folded in on itself, a part of me that still held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this time they would choose me. They didn't. 2 weeks later, I left home with a second-hand suitcase, $212, and a laptop that used to belong to Nana May. She had passed the year before, and I carried her memory like armor. Before I closed the door to my childhood room, I stood for a long time staring at the blank wall where Samantha's framed certificates used to hang. Mine had never been framed. Some were still stacked in a drawer. My new life began in a cramped room above a bakery on the east side of Salem. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners, and the floor creaked with every step. There was no desk, just a folding table and a single lamp that buzzed when it was on too long. But it was mine. It was quiet. No comparisons, no sideways glances. Just space and air and the sound of my own breathing. I enrolled in a full-time graphic design program at the local community college and picked up a job at a 24-hour convenience store. Night shifts paid more. During slow hours, I sat behind the counter sketching campaign concepts and logo drafts in a spiral notebook. Customers came and went, and I barely noticed. I wasn't trying to survive for applause. I was just trying to keep going. On weekends, I cleaned the lobby of the public library. Sometimes I worked freelance gigs online, creating social media graphics for local shops. There were days I was so tired I would drift off while standing, then jolt awake as the register beeped. I never complained. I didn't have the luxury to. No one called to ask if I was doing okay. No one asked if I needed help. Samantha was busy adjusting to dorm life and posting pictures of group brunches and scenic lecture halls. My mom would forward me her posts with comments like, "Look at your sister's confidence. She's really thriving. You should be proud." I learned to reply with a simple, "That's great." I didn't tell them I had eaten instant noodles 5 nights in a row or that the soles of my shoes had started to peel. I didn't tell them how many times I cried in the bathroom, biting down on a towel so no one would hear. What I did tell them once was that I had applied for a scholarship through a partner transfer program with a university in Seattle. I had written the essay in the middle of the night after work, balancing my laptop on my knees. I poured everything into that application, not because I thought they'd care, but because I needed something to believe in. Weeks passed. Then came the email. I remember sitting in the laundry room of the bakery, folding towels, when I opened it. "Congratulations," it said. "You have been selected for a full transfer scholarship to our School of Visual Communications, tuition and monthly living stipend included." I read it 3 times. Then I cried. Not out of joy, but out of sheer release. I didn't have to work 3 jobs anymore. I could sleep at night. I could focus. I texted my mother the news. I told her I was moving to Seattle and that I had earned a full scholarship. There was no reply for 2 days. When her message finally came, it said, "That's good. Samantha just got elected president of her campus wellness club. She's going to do big things." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I expected more, but because even then, part of me still hoped. That was the day I felt something shift. Something I hadn't even realized was still holding on. I stopped refreshing the messaging app, stopped rereading old birthday texts that had become more habit than care. I stopped waiting for them to see me, because the truth had never changed. I had always been visible, just not to them. Packing for Seattle felt like packing a life no one had helped build. I folded my thrifted clothes, stacked my notebooks, and wrapped Nana Mae's old fountain pen in a soft cloth. I carried everything I owned in one suitcase and a canvas bag with a broken zipper. On the bus ride north, I looked out the window and tried to imagine what it might feel like to belong somewhere. Not because someone told me I did, but because I had made it so. When I arrived, the campus was everything I imagined and everything I feared. Polished buildings, students with fresh sneakers and calm eyes. I felt like I had stepped into a different world, one I had watched from behind glass for years. But I had a room, a shared studio apartment with peeling tiles and a lopsided shelf, but it was enough. I had classes that challenged me, professors who gave feedback without judgment. I had time to breathe, to draw, to think. And for the first time, I didn't have to carry my worth like a defense. I just had to live it. My detachment from my family did not happen all at once. It was slow, like letting go of a rope that had always burned your hands. I still answered their messages, I still sent holiday wishes, but there was no ache anymore when they didn't ask how I was. There was only quiet. And in that quiet, I started to hear myself more clearly than I ever had before. In Seattle, everything seemed shinier. The buildings glistened after rain, the streets pulsed with energy, and the students walked with the ease of people who had never had to wonder where their next meal would come from. I arrived with 2 bags, a borrowed coat, and a quiet kind of purpose that didn't need to be announced. My studio apartment was just big enough for a mattress on the floor, a folding chair, and a desk I found abandoned near a dumpster. I fixed its broken leg with duct tape and kept a tin can of pens on top. The walls were bare except for a single sketch I pinned above my desk, a charcoal drawing I had made of a girl sitting under a lamppost, half in light, half in shadow. That girl felt like me. During the week, I attended classes full-time. In the mornings, I cleaned the library lobby before the other students arrived. In the evenings, I waited tables at a family-owned pizza place where the floors were sticky and the tips inconsistent. On weekends, I picked up freelance design work wherever I could, small projects mostly, posters for local cafes, social media graphics for student groups. Each time I hit submit, I held my breath. But slowly, replies started to come in. Good work. Nice execution. Can we hire you again? Recognition, even from strangers, felt like water in a desert. Samantha transferred into the same university that fall. I found out through my mother, who texted, "Great news. Your sister got into the communications program. You should show her around." I stared at the message and wondered what part of my life they thought I had time to spare. We weren't in the same major, but the campus was small. I saw her around sometimes. Her designer tote bag swinging over her shoulder, her name stitched on a hoodie I knew she didn't buy herself. She always looked like she belonged. We didn't speak often. When we did, it was surface level. Classes, cafeteria food, the kind of conversations you have with someone you once knew deeply but had grown too far from to reach. I lived on instant noodles and dollar store pasta. She lived in a renovated dorm room with private bathroom access and a mini fridge stocked with pressed juices. My parents paid her tuition in full. They sent her money each month for living expenses, self-care, whatever she needed to stay focused. I never asked for help. I stopped long ago. In one of my advanced design seminars, we were assigned a group presentation on visual branding. By coincidence or fate, Samantha and I ended up in the same group. I offered an idea for a campaign using illustrated graphics combined with interactive video. Something layered and meaningful. Something new. "That sounds creative," Samantha said in front of everyone. but maybe too complicated. Let's keep it simple. Something fun. Viral. The group nodded. I didn't argue. I stayed up 3 nights in a row building the visual concept. I did the storyboarding, the motion design, the transitions. Samantha made the slideshow and volunteered to present. The day we stood in front of the class, I watched her deliver the pitch like it was her own. Her voice was clear, her smile perfectly timed. Afterward, the professor praised the creativity of the project. She looked at Samantha with approval and said the presentation had flair. I packed up my things without saying a word. Later that evening, I received an email. Jessica, I know you were the backbone of that presentation. Your work stood out. You have a rare instinct for visual storytelling. You also have leadership potential, but you need to stop shrinking yourself. Let your ideas stand where they belong. It was signed, Professor Elaine Tisdale. I read the email again, then once more. I closed my laptop and sat quietly in the dark for a long time. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I just felt something come loose, something I had been holding for too long. It was the hope that if I worked hard enough, my family would finally see me. They didn't. But someone else had. From then on, I stopped looking for validation from people who had never offered it freely. I stopped forwarding links to my mom when my work was published in the student magazine. I stopped checking my phone after sending updates about internships or class awards. Instead, I started pouring my energy into what felt right. I spent extra hours in the lab perfecting a campaign on accessible design. I took an evening course in interactive prototyping, even though it meant giving up my one free night. I started uploading my personal projects to an online forum for young designers. One day, I received a message from an editor at a digital design magazine. He had seen my work and wanted to feature me in a Rising Creatives series. I wrote back with trembling hands, unsure how I'd even caught their attention. When the article came out, I read it alone in the campus library. My name printed next to words like resilient and innovative. It felt surreal. I sent the link to my mom anyway. A small part of me still reached for the impossible. Her reply came 3 days later. That's nice. Samantha is speaking at a campus wellness panel this week. So proud of her. I didn't feel angry, just tired. A kind of tired that comes from running a race you never signed up for. I closed the message, took a screenshot of the article, and slipped it into the folder I kept beneath my mattress. The same one that held Nana May's sketches and my first acceptance letter. I didn't post it online. I didn't need likes to know it mattered. By the end of the semester, I had lined up 2 freelance clients, earned a small design award, and been selected to serve as a teaching assistant for one of the top professors in the department. When I told my father over the phone, he said, "That's good, Jess. Your sister's thinking of starting a podcast. She's always had a natural voice for communication." I stared at the wall, nodded even though he couldn't see me, and changed the subject. That night, I opened a blank page in my journal and wrote 3 sentences. You don't need their eyes on you to shine. You don't need their praise to keep going. You are already more than they ever knew to hope for. And I believed it. For the first time, I truly did. I never thought the turning point would come in an empty hallway on a rainy Friday afternoon. I had just finished mopping the floors in the student gallery when my inbox buzzed. I pulled out my phone with hands still damp and saw the subject line, Northwind Design Fellowship Decision. I stood still for a moment, the sound of students echoing faintly from the floor above. I tapped the email open and read the first line. Congratulations. You have been awarded the Northwind Design Fellowship. My knees nearly gave out. I sat on the edge of a nearby bench, rereading the message like it might disappear. The fellowship was one of the most competitive in the country. It covered the final year of tuition, offered a generous stipend, and included an international internship with one of the partner studios. It had taken weeks of drafting and redrafting my application, nights of doubting myself, and quiet mornings of pushing through anyway. The first person I wanted to tell wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It wasn't even Samantha. It was Nana May. Her number was still saved in my phone. I knew it no longer connected to anyone, but I opened a new message anyway. Nana, I did it. They chose me, just like you said they would. I hit send. The message floated into the void, but I felt lighter. Like she would have known, like somehow she already did. Later that night, I forwarded the email to my parents. The subject line was simple: I got the fellowship. No reply came until the next evening. My mother wrote, "That's good. Samantha just launched her lifestyle blog. She's been getting a lot of attention. We're so proud." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane to New York City with a suitcase full of worn clothes, a leather sketchbook, and a heart that was no longer waiting for applause. The city was louder than I imagined, but also more alive. Yellow taxis, steam from manholes, people walking with purpose. I found a small apartment in Brooklyn, a third-floor walk-up with peeling paint and one working radiator. It was mine. That was enough. The fellowship placed me in a boutique media firm focused on education and public interest campaigns. My official title was design intern, but they treated me like part of the team from day one. I worked on real briefs, contributed to meetings, and saw my ideas make it into print. It was the first time I felt like what I created had weight. That fall, I was invited to a small networking event for fellowship recipients. The room buzzed with conversation and expensive perfume. I stayed near the snack table feeling out of place until someone tapped my shoulder. "Jessica Carter," the woman said. "I'm Rachel Mendez. I've seen your portfolio. You have instinct, not just talent, but clarity. We need that." I knew who she was, the creative director of a multinational media company, someone I had read about in design magazines since high school. She didn't offer flattery, she offered a chance. "We're opening a mentorship program for rising creatives. We'll cover your living expenses through the rest of the year. You'll shadow some of our best designers. I think you're ready." I said yes before I even let myself feel what it meant. By winter, my name was showing up on project credits. Internal teams started asking for me by name. My coworkers stopped treating me like the new intern and started inviting me into brainstorming sessions. I had a badge, a title, a desk with a drawer. I called my parents once during the holidays, just to check in. My mom asked if I had sent Samantha a gift. She had been too busy with her blog to shop. My father asked how cold it was in New York, then passed the phone back. They never asked what I was working on, not really. But it didn't sting the way it used to. I was building something now, something they could not give me and could not take away. At night, I walked home past glowing shop windows and street musicians. Sometimes I carried takeout in one hand and a sketchbook in the other. I decorated my apartment with postcard prints and a small corkboard where I pinned pieces of praise I had once wished would come from my family. Good instincts. Clear voice. Original eye. I started writing in my journal again. Not about hurt, about gratitude, about finding my own rhythm in a city that didn't slow down for anyone, but still had space for me. I stopped expecting closure. I started making peace with open endings. The success I had once dreamed of wasn't loud. It didn't come with trophies or applause. It looked like quiet mornings at my desk with the radiator humming. It felt like waking up without dread, like being chosen for something not because I fought to be seen, but because I showed up fully as myself. One night, while reviewing mock-ups for a youth literacy campaign, my phone buzzed with a message from Samantha. "Just watched a video of your speech. I didn't know you were that good. I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner." I stared at the screen for a long time, not out of anger, just stillness. Then I wrote back, "Thank you. I hope you're finding something that feels real for you too." And that was it. No drama, no big reveal. Just truth. And I had finally learned how to live with that. It had been nearly 4 years since I walked out of that house on Rosewood Lane with my life packed into 2 bags. When my mother called and asked if I would come home for dinner, her voice sounded unfamiliar. Softer, careful, like she was testing the waters to see if I would say no. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. The house looked the same. Cream curtains in the front window. The same ceramic rooster on the porch step. The front door still stuck a little when you opened it. Inside, everything was arranged the way I remembered. Plaid sofa, family photos on the shelf. The air smelled like rosemary and lemon. Something warm was cooking. Samantha was already there, sitting on the staircase, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I stepped in, gave a small smile, then stood to greet me. It was brief. A hello and a nod. We didn't hug. Dinner was calm. Quiet even. My parents asked about the weather in New York, whether the subway was safe, whether I had eaten enough during the flight. I answered politely. I did not mention the fellowship, the campaigns I had worked on, or the article that had come out last week with my name in the byline. I wasn't there to perform. After the dishes were cleared, my mother invited me to the living room. My father sat on the edge of the sofa, glasses in hand but not reading. My mother folded her hands in her lap. Her eyes flicked toward me, then away. "We want to talk to you," she said, "about everything, and about what's happened." I nodded but didn't speak. "We know," my mother continued, "that we weren't always fair to you. I think we just assumed you'd be okay. You always seemed like you didn't need us the way Samantha did." I looked at her, not with anger, not with bitterness, just stillness. "I was okay because I had to be," I said, but that didn't mean I didn't want support, or kindness, or to be asked if I was tired. My voice wasn't raised, it was steady, but the words lingered in the air like smoke. My father looked down, his fingers pressed against the bridge of his nose. "You're still our daughter," my mother said softly. "Can we start over?" I took a deep breath. "We can try," I said, "but it won't be the same. I have boundaries now. I don't live for approval anymore. If you want to know me, I'll share. If not, I won't wait." There was no reply at first, just a silence that didn't feel heavy this time. It felt necessary. Then Samantha spoke. "Do you think," she began, "that maybe you made it harder for me? That now Mom and Dad compare everything I do to you? I feel like I'm always falling short." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was still polished, still graceful, but there was something new in her eyes, something unsteady. "I never wanted to make you feel less," I said. "I just lived the life I deserved. You can too. But you have to stop waiting for Mom and Dad to pave the way." She didn't answer. She just nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. I stood, collected my bag, and moved toward the door. No one stopped me. No one begged me to stay longer. That was okay. Outside, the air was cool. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and something faintly sweet. I walked down the familiar sidewalk, past the same houses, the same fences, but I didn't feel like a visitor or a runaway. I felt like myself. For the first time in that house, I had said what needed to be said. And I had left without needing to be understood. I turned 26 on a quiet fall morning in Brooklyn. No party, no candles. Just a cup of coffee in my favorite chipped mug and a soft breeze drifting through the open window. The sun moved across the hardwood floor in long, golden strips, and for the first time in a long time, I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. The apartment was still small, but it had become something I never had growing up. A home. My own paintings hung on the walls, framed simply but with care. A stack of journals sat on the bookshelf, filled with words I had never shared but needed to write. Some mornings I walked to the corner bakery and picked up a croissant before heading to the office. Other days, I wandered through Central Park, notebook in hand, just to sketch whatever caught my eye. A bench, a falling leaf. The curve of someone's laughter. My life was no longer loud. It didn't need to be. I had friends now who saw me for who I was, not who I had to prove myself to be. People who didn't measure success in noise, but in honesty. I still worked hard. The deadlines hadn't changed. The pressure hadn't disappeared. But I approached it differently now. I led projects at work with quiet certainty. I mentored interns who reminded me of the girl I used to be, the one with potential but no map. On the windowsill above my desk sat a frame. Not of a diploma or an award, but of a handwritten quote I had inked onto paper one late night when the city wouldn't sleep. "You are enough, always were, always will be." I read it every time doubt crept in, and I believed it more each time. That afternoon, I received a text from Samantha. It was short, no emojis, no exclamation points, just a photo of a small classroom where she now led wellness sessions for young women and a message beneath it. "You once told me to find something for myself. I think I finally understand what you meant. Thank you." I stared at the screen for a while, not because I was surprised, but because it felt real, honest. No competition, no comparison. Just one woman reaching out to another. I replied with a simple message, I'm glad. And I meant it. There are still days when I think about the past, about the silence, about the weight I carried for so long, but those thoughts no longer hurt. They are part of the foundation now, proof that I climbed out of the shadows without needing anyone to pull me up. Love, I've learned, is not something you chase in the faces of others. It begins the moment you see your own reflection and recognize your worth. And on this birthday, in this little apartment under the soft Brooklyn light, I finally feel free. Jessica Carter's story is one of quiet resilience and powerful transformation. From a childhood overshadowed by favoritism to years spent unnoticed and undervalued, she learned early how to survive without praise. But through struggle and solitude, she built something stronger than approval. She built herself. From late-night shifts to scholarship wins, from forgotten birthdays to national recognition, Jessica stopped chasing validation and began shaping her own path. She found peace not in loud success, but in steady growth, chosen friendships, and the quiet certainty that she was enough all along. Her journey reminds us that self-worth is not something others grant. It is something you claim. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own journey, we invite you to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about strength, growth, and the quiet victories that shape who we become.